Thank you so much for joining me today for our discussion on why chronic disease occurs. Now, I'm so excited to introduce you to Dr. Jerry Tennant, but before you do, I want to formally welcome you from the Tennant Institute and the sister company, Senergy Medical Group. So let's jump right in. I want to tell you a little bit about Dr. Jerry Tennant, and then you're going to hear directly from him himself. Dr. Jerry Tennant is a world-renowned doctor and ophthalmologist. He actually was heavily involved in the creation of the laser that is used for LASIK surgery. Now, at the height of his career, unfortunately, he ended up contracting encephalitis because he was treating a patient with a laser, and they didn't realize at the time that lasers did not kill viruses. He was treating a patient from Europe who had leukemia, and the virus ended up going from the patient through Dr. Tennant's mask and into his brain. He ended up having encephalitis in his brain as well as several other viruses. He went to countless doctors and they didn't know what to do. As the virus spread from his brain to his spleen, Dr. Tennant experienced overwhelming fatigue. As he explained it, he'd be able to see a patient and know what was wrong with them, but he couldn't figure out how to write a simple prescription. He was only able to stay awake for 2 to 3 hours a day, and he decided to use that time in order to study cellular biology. He decided that if he could figure out how to make one cell work, he could figure out how to make them all work. Through extensive research, Dr. Tennant realized that the body actually needs a specific level of voltage along with the correct nutrition and a specific type of detoxing of the body in order to create new and healthy cells. Through extensive research, he realized that all chronic disease is marked by a low voltage in the body. By following this theory, he managed to heal himself completely of encephalitis of the brain, as well as the other viruses that were, making him sick. And he has compiled all of those different ideas into his book, Healing His Voltage, and he's going to explain some of those ideas with you all today. Senergy Medical Group and the Tennant Institute is devoted to giving you the tools that you need in order to create new and healthy cells in your body so that you can get well, be well, and live well. And because of this, we actually have an integrative health conference that we host about every other month, both in person and virtual. And through these conferences, we go further into the theories of healing his voltage, as well as bring other speakers that participate in the conference. Now, these speakers cover everything from the importance of nitric oxide to the correct levels of pH in your water, as well as proper nutrition and the correct way to detox your body. But we're not going to go into that today. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about it. Now, what you're going to see today is a little clip from one of these integrative health conferences, and Dr. Tennant is going to explain a little bit more about his theory behind healing his voltage and how to use the tools that he has developed to give your body the correct nutrition and voltage that your body needs. And now, without further ado, Dr. Jerry Tennant.
Standard medical paradigm isn't working terribly well, and that we need a new paradigm. And so I suggested to you a paradigm based on the fact that we're constantly wearing ourselves out. So you get new cells in the macula of your eye every 48 hours. The skin you're sitting in today is 6 weeks old. Your liver is 8 weeks old. Your nervous system's 8 months old, etc. So because we're constantly wearing ourselves out, we have to make new cells. And so I have proposed that chronic disease only occurs when you lose the ability to make new cells that work. Well, if you buy into that theory with me, then that leads us to the obvious question, well, what's it take to make a new cell that works? Well, we came to realize that cells need minus 25 millivolts of electron donor to run, correct? But to make a new cell, you need double that energy. You need minus 50 millivolts. So what you find in essentially all chronic disease is that the organ that's not working well doesn't have the 25 millivolts to run, and certainly doesn't have the 50 millivolts that it needs to make new cells. And thus, as cells wear out, they don't get replaced. And oftentimes, not only do they just disappear, they're replaced with scar tissue. And one of the things that's important to understand is that what I know how to do, what I think I know how to do, and what I'm going to try to teach you how to do is to help the body have the things it needs to make new cells. But a new cell can't push a scar out of the way. So if you have a scar in a critical position, then this approach will not be successful because a cell can't push a scar out of the way. So what might that be the case? Well, if I've got this, some little scar in the middle of my liver, it probably doesn't make so much difference. But if I have a scar right in the center of my macula, where the light has to focus, guess what? Doing this for that macula is not going to help, because what we're going to do is we're going to give the body the voltage and the materials that it needs to make new cells, but those new cells can't remove the scar that's in the middle of the macula. Does that make sense? So always remember that this technology cannot move a scar out of the way. And so the scars that seem to cause the most mischief are in the nervous system. And I include the eye and the ear as part of the nervous system. So oftentimes, if you have a lesion in there or in part of the brain, then it's less likely to help. Having said that, the brain is very adept at overcoming scars. So when you see somebody with a chronic illness, what you must do is ask the question, well, why won't the battery pack to that illness, to that organ, hold a charge? And so you begin to go down the checklist. The first thing you think about is thyroid hormone, because thyroid controls the voltage of every cell membrane in the body. T3 controls cell membranes, and T2 controls mitochondria. Then you look at scars, because if you put a scar across a muscle battery pack, you can drain off some of the voltage. And then you look at dental, because all of these various circuits go through very specific teeth. And so if you have an infection in a tooth, it will interrupt the flow of voltage through that circuit. But finally, and probably most important, is emotions. Emotions are stored in the body as magnetic fields, and if you have a magnetic field in the middle of a circuit, it blocks the flow of voltage. It's my belief that all chronic disease that's not caused by a poison or a toxin is caused by, in the very beginning, by an emotion that gets stored in a tooth. Now, I recognize how weird that sounds, but let me just explain it briefly now, and then we'll come back to it as the course goes along. If you have a quartz watch, which most of you are wearing, what's stored in that crystal in quartz? Electrons, right? Voltage. So your watch works because you have a crystal made of quartz in your watch that provides the energy for your watch to run. So energy, voltage, likes to get stored in crystals. What in the body is crystalline? Your teeth. So different emotions tend to be attracted from their frequencies to different acupuncture circuits. But when they get into that circuit, I think they get trapped in the crystalline structure of the tooth that's in that circuit. Now, as we'll explain to you later, inside of every tooth is a pump that pumps fluid from inside the tooth to inside the mouth so you don't get decay. It was proven at the Loma Linda Dental School that it's not eating too much candy that gives you cavities, it's shutting down the pump that's inside the tooth that gives you cavities. So when you get an emotion stuck inside of a tooth, it shuts down the pump. Now you get a cavity, then you get a filling, then you get a bigger filling, then you get a bigger filling, then you get a crown, then you get another crown, then you get a root canal, and now you have cancer. Or somewhere along the way, it's some other, as the voltage gets shut down, as that tooth blocks more and more and more and more of the voltage over time, then whatever organs are on that circuit began to not have the minus 25 millivolts to run or the minus 50 millivolts to repair themselves, and so they began to malfunction. So in almost every situation you will find that if you go looking for it, and we're going to talk in some detail about how to look for it and how to fix it, you will find that if you go back in time, you'll find the emotion that began to take that tooth down, that took that circuit down. So for all of my career, and even back when I was in my youth, I would hear people talk about the mind-body connection, that, quote, emotions caused illness, but nobody ever could explain to me what that meant. I think I just explained to you what that means, right? That the emotions, the magnetic field of emotions gets stuck in the tooth, which takes the circuit down that's associated with that tooth, and once you don't have the voltage, you start this tumbling of things. When you don't have voltage, you don't have oxygen. When you don't have oxygen, your mitochondria don't work, and bugs show up, and you have pain, and then eventually you get a malignancy, right? So the cascade of getting sick all can relate back to an emotional event that happens somewhere in your life. Now, to understand the concepts that we're talking about, I like to talk about my thumb. So what's the voltage in this thumb? It's a good thumb. Minus 25 millivolts, right? So now I smash it with a hammer, and I've just destroyed a bunch of cells in my thumb. Well, when you destroy cells, the tissue automatically goes to minus 50 millivolts if it's capable of doing so. And the reason it does that is that, first of all, you need that much energy to make new cells, but also when you go to minus 50 millivolts, it causes the arterioles to dilate. Why do you want that to happen? Because that's the way it dumps all of the raw materials at the curb, so you've got them available to make new cells, right? But when arterioles dilate, then you get swelling, you get redness, you get warmth, and all of that process is dumping things out at the curb so that you can make new cells. What I've just described is what's always been called inflammation. So inflammation is swelling, redness, heat, and pain, and the pain that you get is a pulsing pain. So minus 50 millivolts tends to be a pulsing pain, and most of you have smashed your finger either in a door or with a hammer, so you know what I'm talking about, right? It's that kind of pain, which is a different kind of pain than the hurts all the time kind of pain that's associated with chronic illness. Well, so here we take the thumb, we hit it with the hammer, it goes over here to minus 50 millivolts, it's swollen, it's red, etc., has a pulsing pain, gets busy and replaces all the cells I smashed with a hammer, and now it goes back down over here, and I'm back at minus 25 millivolts, and your thumb's back to normal. That's what you hope happens, right? On the other hand, if I smash my thumb with a hammer, but I can't get up to minus 50 millivolts because the muscle battery pack that goes to the thumb can't hold the charge, then I can't get up here and I stay down here. So I'm below 20 millivolts. So down here, I'm stuck in chronic disease because I don't have the necessary voltage to make new cells. So when I'm down here, I can take as many pills as I want, I can do as much surgery as I want, but I'll never heal. And the reason is, I can't make new cells because I don't have 50 millivolts. So in order for this chronic disease to heal, what do I have to do? I have to insert enough electrons to get me back up over here to minus 50 so I can start making new cells, and then I can heal. Does that make sense? Now, remember when I'm down here, I have it hurts all the time kind of pain because low voltage is associated with low oxygen, and low oxygen is associated with pain. Now, if I take and put in enough electrons to get me up to minus 25 millivolts, the pain will go away, but if I stop putting electrons in, I'm going to use them all up and I'm going to end up back down here again, right? So the only way I can get well is to keep putting enough electrons in to push me all the way over to minus 50, and then I can make new cells and heal, and then I come back here and I'm well. So the point is that sometimes, you're treating something and you say, well, I used the biomodulator a little while, the pain went away, but a few hours or a few days later it came back. What does that tell you? Well, you didn't get it up to minus 50, so you didn't get the healing process. You see that? The other thing that sometimes happens is that when you push it up to minus 50, you get pulsing pain, so you can feel like, oh, I got a little worse. Yeah, you got a little worse because you're back up here into the pulsing pain type of area. The tissue's swollen, it's red and whatever, because now it's in the healing mode. The other thing that happens, of course, is once you get back up here into this mode, the cells start detoxing because they've been sitting around not able to clean house. So basically, if you understand what I just told you about the thumb, you understand the mechanism of what you have to do to heal, and that is when an organ's malfunctioning, you have to figure out, does it have the ability to get up to minus 50 millivolts, and if not, why? And then we go down the checklist: thyroid, scars, dental infections, emotions, and toxins. Now, let's be sure we understand the human wiring system, and then we'll start learning more about how, and actually practicing being able to measure these voltage systems. That our muscles are piezoelectric rechargeable batteries. So what does the word piezoelectric mean? If you take a piece of quartz and you squeeze it with a pair of pliers, it emits electrons. So the phenomenon where you stress something and that causes that something to emit electrons is called piezoelectricity. So what that means is that every time I move my muscles, I'm generating electrons, which tells us why exercise is so important, because it's the mechanism by which your major muscle battery packs are recharged. It also explained to us why when you have surgery, for example, if they get you up almost immediately and start moving you around, and you do better that way because you're actually restoring some of the voltage that got sucked up during the surgery. So our muscles not only are electron generators, but they are electron storage devices, so they're actually muscle battery packs. So when you move a muscle, it emits electrons and recharges itself. So then our muscles are stacked one on top of each other in a very specific order, like batteries in a flashlight, to form a power pack. And they're surrounded by a common sheath of what's called fascia. And that sheath around them you can sort of think of as maybe it's like the flashlight itself. It keeps keeps the battery stack isolated as to one battery stack. Now, the fascia is that shiny stuff you see when you carve your Christmas turkey. You remember, you start carving and you see all that shiny stuff in there? That's fascia. Now, fascia is a semiconductor. So what in the world is a semiconductor? A semiconductor is a collection of molecules that's assembled in such a way that it moves electrons at the speed of light, but only in one direction. Okay? It moves electrons at the speed of light, but only in one direction. So basically, it's the body's wiring system. So inside this stocking of fascia, a fascial wire, we have batteries which provide the electrons to the wire, and then the wire carries it from place to place. Now, understanding that fascia is a semiconductor helps us understand how things like essential oils work. When you put an essential oil on your big toe, the frequency of that essential oil is in your brain at the speed of light. And so that's how they work. So it's not the oil itself or the chemistry of the oil, it's the frequencies of the oil that go through that circuitry, through the semiconductor of the fascia, to affect reset the frequencies of the body. So the biggest battery system we have in the body is our muscles. And a stack of muscle batteries is what's been called an acupuncture meridian. So now here we see that our muscles are stacked one on top of each other, surrounded by a common sheath of fascia, which forms a battery pack, just like stacking batteries in a flashlight, and that every organ in the body has its own battery pack, and a stack of muscle batteries, what's been called an acupuncture meridian. So this one, called the spleen meridian, starts down in the big toe, goes up the inside of the leg. A special branch goes over to the female genitalia, where it gets the uterus, the vagina, the ovaries. Then it goes around the back, where it gets the adrenal glands, it gets the spleen and the pancreas. Then it goes on up into the neck and makes a loop. And where it makes the loop, it hooks into the what's called the stomach circuit. And as it makes that loop, it's where it goes to the macula of the eye. So the power supply to the macula of the eye is the stomach circuit. So anyone who has macular degeneration is going to, guess what? Have low voltage in the stomach circuit. So the macula, which normally replaces itself every 48 hours, can no longer do it if the stomach circuit can't provide the 50 millivolts it takes to make new cells. So if the oxygen goes away, the body makes new little blood vessels to grow in there, trying to bring more oxygen in. So when macular degeneration begins, and it's just it can't replace it because it doesn't have 50 millivolts, we call that dry macular degeneration. But as time goes on and the voltage gets lower and the oxygen gets lower, then the body sends in new little blood vessels trying to bring more oxygen into the macula, and we call that wet macular degeneration. So the only difference between dry and wet is how long has it been sitting there struggling without enough oxygen. Does that make sense? So if you want to fix wet macular degeneration, guess what you have to do? Raise the voltage, which brings the oxygen back in, which then stops the signal that says, hey, we're out of oxygen over here, please send in some new blood vessels. Stops that process if you fix the voltage and thus fix the oxygen. Stomach circuit gets the thinking part of your brain. So if you don't have voltage in that, guess what? You have trouble thinking. You have brain fog, you have trouble with your memory. And also the frontal lobe is the motor part of your body, so you start having trouble with tremors, etc. Then, of course, as I mentioned, it gets the eye, it gets the thyroid, it gets the breast, it gets the stomach, it gets the male genitalia, and then back down to the big toe. So we have 6 of these loops of up and down muscle battery packs that provide all of the voltage for the body to work. It provides the minus 25 millivolts you need for the organs that are on that circuit to run, and it provides the minus 50 millivolts you need to repair things when they wear out. So chronic disease occurs when one or more of these muscle battery packs won't hold a charge, which leads us to the obvious question: why won't that muscle battery pack hold a charge? Thyroid, because thyroid hormone controls the voltage of every cell in the body. So you have to be sure you get the thyroid right. And at the same time you're working on thyroid, you work on its buddy. You remember what its buddy's name is? Adrenaline. Then you look for scars, because if you put a scar across one of these circuits and it touches the fascia, it's going to drain off some of the voltage, isn't it? So you have to see if there are scars in the circuit that's not holding a charge. And then you think about dental, because all of these circuits go through very specific teeth. And then if you've got an infection in a tooth, then it blocks the flow of voltage through it. And then you think about emotions, because emotions are magnetic fields that get stuck in the teeth and block the circuit just like an infection does. And then finally, of course, you can have toxins like heavy metals and the toxins that come out of dental infections, and glyphosate, which is a really huge one that we're having to deal with now because so much of our water supply has been poisoned by Roundup. You see how we have a battery, or you have an electrical system in the body. So we have a battery pack, we have a capacitor of our cell membranes, we have the easy water inside the cell, we have the mitochondria ATP battery, and we have the DNA that we have to keep charged up. So, so characteristic of all chronic disease is that you don't have the voltage to make cells work correctly, and you don't have the 50 millivolts to make new cells. And so when cells wear out, you can't make new ones, and so slowly the organ begins to malfunction until finally when the voltage drops so much that it goes past zero and you flip the polarity and you get all the way down to plus 30 millivolts, what do you get? Cancer. And a cancer is a placenta that is attempting to bring more oxygen into that tissue to keep it alive, right? So if you're going to deal with that, you're going to have to deal with why is the voltage so low that caused the oxygen to be so deficient that the stem cells went out and made a placenta to try to keep it alive. So the point then is that by understanding the body's electronic system, you begin to be able to put all of the pieces together as to why that organ's malfunctioning.
The human body really never forgets how to heal, and it will attempt to do so if it has the voltage, the nutrition, and you've dealt with the toxins. One caveat is that this system works by allowing the body to make new cells. Most people will have their illnesses either resolved or certainly diminished a great deal if you simply follow the 5 things that we've talked about in this lecture.
Again, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoyed learning from Dr. Jerry Tennant about healing its voltage, about why your body needs voltage in order to create new and healthy cells. Now, if you have any further questions or if you want to learn more, we have advisors standing by at the virtual booth. I strongly encourage you to come and check us out. We also have a free ebook that you can sign up for so you can learn more. Again, thank you so much for joining us. And we hope that we have started to give you the tools that you need in order to get well, be well, and live well.